You are my hero. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were there. I'm here today to talk about heroes. More specifically, how God, throughout recorded history, has taken zeros and made heroes out of them. As early as 1400 BC, the book of Genesis reports that God chose an adulterer in Genesis 16:4 and a liar in Genesis 21 for greatness. Genesis tells us of the indiscretions of this man named Abram. He fathered a child by the maid of his wife and lied to the Egyptian king about his wife being his sister, not his wife, which was the truth. And yet the story goes on to say that God changed his name to Abraham and made this lying adulterer the father of the chosen people of Israel. So Abraham was a wealthy landowner who was an adulterer and a liar, who is considered the first of the three patriarchs of Israel and the father of God's chosen people of Israel. I love that story. Turn the calendar forward a few centuries later. God had big plans for a murderer. He chose Moses to convince the king of Egypt, also called Pharaoh, to release the chosen people of Israel from bondage, lead them through the Red Sea to the Promised Land, and he would also be the human through which God would impart the Ten Commandments. So Moses, with God's help and a few plagues, convinced Pharaoh to release the Jewish people, possibly 6 million strong at the time, from their slavery. Moses led them to the promised land of Canaan. On the way, he was given the Ten Commandments and wrote the Torah, the Jewish books of the law. The books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy to you and me. So Moses was a slave, a murderer, a negotiator, a leader, a lawgiver, and a prophet. Move ahead to the 1st century. He was an inconsequential fisherman. As he was casting his net into the Sea of Galilee, Jesus chose Peter to be one of his disciples. He became one of history's most famous liars when he denied he even knew Jesus as he was hanging on the cross. This same liar became the first Christian evangelist, converting over 3,000 at one service. He was the first to preach to the Gentiles. The Catholic Church proclaimed him a saint. So Peter was a fisherman, disciple, liar, fisher of men, preacher, saint. Probably the best known zero to hero is the author of most of the New Testament. Arguably, he was a mass murderer, and certainly one of the most ardent enemies of the Christian movement. Prior to his conversion, Saul of Tarsus was a Roman citizen, was schooled by the chief rabbi, and was well on his way to be a respected member of the Jewish elite. In that role, he was no doubt responsible for the persecution and deaths of thousands of Christians. As the converted Paul, he evangelized most of the then known world, and like Peter, was sainted by the Catholic Church. Paul was a Roman citizen, a rabbinic scholar, murderer, convert, preacher, writer, saint.